Where's my face? Where's my? Hang on. Hang on. Hang on 1 sec. Uh. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the stream, everybody. Hello. We're learning how to stream once again. The skill set that I forget every few months. Hi. Hello, everybody. It's been a while. In fact, it's been so long that I accidentally deleted my sleeping GIF. So that's why the starting soon screen is a little different today, because yeah, it's gone and I need to remake it. Look, it was in a folder that I was like, this is probably not important, and then I oh my god, Barrett, what do you, has it genuinely been 45 months? What does that even mean? 4 years? Why is there an ad break? Hey, Rise Duet, how's it going? You checked out Nogi's latest video? He's learned some pretty cool things from Naruto mobile animations. No, I haven't. Oh my god, Zadrian also subscribed. Thank you so much for the Prime. X Adrian T. I don't know if that, I think that's how you pronounce it. Choco Chip, how's it going? Hello. Zat Max. Then he said he doesn't deserve subs. It was true. He stopped streaming. That is also true. Yeah, I do stop streaming very often. So please, I don't deserve subscriptions. It's actually facts. Anyway, Green Gator, how's it going? Barrett, long time no see. I hope you've been doing well. Friend Chizo, hello, welcome from Zambia. Holy crap. Let's see. Oh, Xiangling Forever, you're back. Hello. Kurotenshi, welcome. Miss Frizzle, hello. Gelnius, hello. Juice Boxes, hello, welcome. Goo 4.5 when? Actually, that's a great question. We'll talk about it a little bit, but it's a difficult problem to solve, is what we'll say. Yes. Yeah, Goo 4.5 is a challenge. Can you guys hear me, by the way? Is there still an ad going on? I think it should be over now, right? It says 5 seconds left. I don't know what that means, but Bezos has some sort of chokehold on my Twitch right now, and I've never figured it out. Does Goo work for Linux? It does, technically, but we've never actually built it for Linux because it's just, there's so many different Linux versions that you have to debug for, so we're like, well, it should be fine. You can build it and make sure it works. We can't guarantee anything. You can hear me? Oh, cool. But yeah, so for Linux, you have to build it yourself. If you're having trouble with it, you can definitely like shoot some messages into GitHub. There's no guarantee we'll know exactly how to solve it. It's just troubleshooting is difficult. Jason, welcome. Got an idea. Been cooking inspired by your Katsu cats. You're the one who got me into Blender, so this one's for you, brother. Oh my god. Oh, that's sick. Frangizo, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Katsu cats is, man. Are you saying like the original Katsu cats, like the OG Katsu with the cats, or do you mean like the Overwatch cats? Because that was a whole other thing. And then there's also the anime cats. But I feel like most people who say Katsu cats mean the original. So I'm touched you even know the original name. Tamarin. Thanks. As I gurgle my water. What's up? Alex wins all the time. You seem to be doing well. Anyway, it has been a while. So what are we gonna do today? I'm sure you guys can probably tell from the title, but I have a very particular plan for today, and that is we are going to commit some murder. Just some casual murder. I woke up today and I was like, I feel like there's something I really need to talk about. And we're gonna get to like the bulk of the beef of the, you know, of the butter. You know what I mean? We'll get into the bread of the lettuce, but eventually, you know, I'm gonna remake the concept of the 12 principles of anime. We'll get to that. But for now, I would like to do a little exercise, if you will, right? A little practice in culling the unnecessary. Yeah. So today's stream is dedicated to ranking the 12 principles of animation. I have strong opinions about the 12 principles of animation, by the way. In case you guys aren't familiar, I've ranted about this in our patron streams. We have patron streams every month where we review your animations, and it's actually really cool, by the way. If you guys ever want to join, please do, because I love watching your animations. It's been awesome. It's been really, really cool. I get a rant about stuff that, you know, I don't get a rant about publicly because it's too aggressive and too passionful. This being one of them, which we're going to start with. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting, I don't want to call it a series, but it's definitely going to be a long topic of discussion. Not just today, but maybe in a couple of other streams or maybe a video one day, because I do want to talk about why the principles of animation are total garbage. But some of them are good. Some of them are good. They're not all bad. But a lot of them are lying to you. And I want to make sure people know that they're lying to you. Now, this of course is our battleground. And it's you know, it's gonna be a bit of a review, a little bit of yeah, some examples of things, right? And then perhaps even just I suspect personally that because I haven't scripted any of this. I don't know exactly how this is gonna go, but I suspect by diving into this topic, I will break into several rants. And as I break into these rants, I may go into Blender and demonstrate a few things. So we're gonna see how this goes, okay? Yeah. Just a raise of hands, by the way. How many of you guys have heard of the 12 animation principles, or the 12 principles of animation, technically is what they're called, which is just longer. But anyway, 12 animation principles. How many of you guys have heard of it? And then, yeah, you can type 1 in chat. Actually, that makes more sense. Type 1 in chat. Type 1 in chat. Man, guys, I haven't streamed in so long. I don't know how to, like, how do I how does this work? There we go. 1. It was traumatic. Oh, excellent. I'm sure you will enjoy this lesson then today. I really hope you do. Should we type a number for each principle we know? Genuinely, actually, well, that's gonna take a while to dissect, but like, there's gonna be an interesting. I want to do an interesting exercise about how many of them people like genuinely understand, right? Like, because this is part of the reason why I think it's a little interesting. Like, people who have learned animation, right? Let's actually go through them. Let's talk about them, not from like a perspective of like, let's explain every single one, because I don't want to do that quite yet. I'm gonna get into that, but like, I want to see how many of these are like, do people feel like they have a good grasp of, right? Because this is a really important aspect of it. Snackwell, I kept trying to tell you Ninjago animation was crazy. That's true. You were. That's true. It's been years, and finally I listened. Yes, I know. It's long overdue. I appreciate you trying though. All right. So, Antique Doll, hello. Welcome. What page should we turn to? Yes. So, I want to dive into this. All right. Let's go through one by one, and I want to hear what you guys say. So, squash and stretch. This is a pretty common one. This is probably one of the most famous one, I would say, because everybody talks about it, even outside of animation circles. I think people kind of know what the concept of squash and stretch is. Now, this is coming from someone who's an animator, so I might not be right about that. Maybe nobody's heard of it, but like, how many of you guys know squash and stretch confidently, right? Like, type 1 in chat if you confidently know what squash and stretch is and what it means. Barrett says, I know them all, but I don't have a good grasp of them all. Like, anticipation is one of the hardest ones for me to figure out. Fair. That's good. We got a lot of ones in chat for squash and stretch, actually. That's good. That's good. I think this one is pretty self-explanatory, so that's good. That's good. Okay. All right. Good to know. Timing and motion. How many of you guys, you can type 2 in chat if you feel like you're not super confident. 1 if you're super confident. Timing and motion. 1, 2, 1.5, 1. Okay. Interesting. We have a 3 here from Drugan. Very. Okay, interesting. More 1s than 2s for sure. That's good. All right. Anticipation. 1s or 2s. 1 for confident. 2 for you don't fully have a grasp on it and what it means. 2, 1, 1.5, 1, 1.2, 2, 1, 1. Okay. Also around the same as timing and motion. It's sort of like more ones and twos. Not bad. Okay, cool, fair enough. Staging. 1 or 2. Staging. We have 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay, got a couple ones, mostly twos. Okay, this is good. This is great. This is great information. Cool. Okay, mostly twos. This is actually the first one we had more twos than ones, I think. A little bit, it's close to even, but it's actually more twos than ones. Very interesting. Okay, cool. Follow through and overlapping action. Type 1 in chat if you're confident you know what that means, and type 2 in chat if you don't really for sure know or have a grasp on what that means. Follow through and overlapping action. Okay, mostly ones. Very good, excellent. Cool. All right, now straight ahead and pose to pose. Ones or twos? 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 1.2, 1, 1, 1, 1. Mostly ones. Okay, cool. All right. Okay, mostly ones. That's good. Slow in and slow out. Are we looking at ones or twos? Okay. This is mostly ones as well. Good, excellent. Arcs are pretty easy. We're just gonna assume that's 1, right? Yeah, right, guys. I do have to double check. It's okay if it's a 2. I need information. Yes, gulp. Cool. Arcs are 1. Good, excellent. Exaggeration, 1s or 2s. This is where it kind of gets a little harder, I feel like. 1s or 2s. Mostly 1s. Very good. We got 1, 2, 2 2s. Okay. Just learning it. Fair. Mostly 1s still. Very good. Secondary action. Studio Trigger is a Japanese company, so they like their animation principles are slightly different. We're probably gonna look into the Japanese animation principles a little bit later as well, and we'll kind of compare them and see what the difference is, right? Because it's pretty interesting. You look at anime, you look at Western cartoons, and they don't feel the same, and there's a reason for that. Okay, so secondary action is actually half twos, half ones. Kind of interesting. Okay, and then we have solid drawing. Doesn't RT follow something similar for Ruby? I don't know if that's true. I think they're mostly Western. 2, 1, 2. No idea what it is. Fair. 1, 2, 2, 2, 2. Mostly twos so far. Drawing, what's that? Is it like rendering? Yeah, actually, honestly, that's a fun difference between 2D and 3D. Yeah, I get it, but it's hard. That's fair. That's also fair. Yeah. Cool. And then appeal. We have 1s or 2s on that one. 1 for confident. You know what appeal means. 2 for I don't really know what appeal means. Cool. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Very cool. Lots of 1s. We got 2 from Barrett. Valid. Mostly 1s. Root of a 1.8532. All right. Okay. Cool. Good to know. Looks like most people are clear with most things, which is good. But what if I told you guys were wrong? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. So what happened in Cyberkatsu? Oh, Cyberkatsu was just a fun little project we did. We're not necessarily going to be continuing it yet, unless we decide to, But yeah. All right. You guys ready? Okay. Here's what I'm gonna tell you guys my opinions on each one of these animation principles. You ever get that some of these principles don't seem necessary feeling? Yes. So, okay, let's go through this one by one. I'm gonna take a look at what we can do here. I want to see if I can choose one to start with. I have opinions. I have opinions. Yes, I do. Hmm. Okay. We're gonna go in order here. Okay? Do you animate with tablet slash stylus? No, I animate with mouse entirely. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Squash and stretch. Let's talk about squash and stretch. Squash and stretch is a nice staple of animation. It has like a nice like household name to it. It's easy to understand. It means that when you are putting pressure on something, it will squash, and when you release that pressure, it will stretch. So you have a really good example of this with like a ball bouncing, and you also have like just various movements in character animation and stuff like that, where you have like a hand slashing across the screen and it like kind of pulls itself. That pressure is releasing, so it kind of stretches and kind of smears, right? Those kinds of things. It's related to smearing, by the way, which is generally actually more common, I think, in Eastern animation than Western animation, but they're there. So smears are always there as a kind of like version of the stretch principle, which is cool. So squash and stretch as a principle is nice. It's nice that it's conglomerated into one as well, because technically they're two values of the same spectrum, right? So pretty interesting. Squash and stretch, I would say honestly, it's a pretty solid one. I would give it a strong A. It's a strong A. It's good. Preserve volume modifier, my beloved. Yes, exactly. If you guys don't know, preserve volume modifier is a let me show you guys. Actually, this is really cool, because when you talk about squash and stretch, you can actually get something really interesting here with let's see if it works. Preserve volume. This is gonna be with the it's actually just with a bone, I believe. So if you have a bone, let me just do this, and you have a guy, and you do this, right? I believe, oh gosh, what's the best way to show this quickly? There is a where did it go? Am I crazy? I could have sworn it was right here. Oh no, it's in stretch 2. That's what it was. No, it's not. Where is it? Guys, I'm going crazy. I'm going crazy. Somebody hacked Blender. You should make the tier list in Blender. Wait. Wait. No. No, I'm not. This is too much work. It's too much work. Preserve. No, volume. The volume is not. It's one of the. It's a checkbox inside of a constraint. Am I crazy? I'm crazy. I want to show you guys. I want to do it, but why am I blanking on where that checkbox is? Because I thought it was in the bone. Oh, volume variation. I mean, it works actually. Just kidding. It already works technically. I just realized. Because if you do this, right? Gosh, this whole time I thought it was a checkbox. It's not. It's actually just automatic, right? Crazy. It's automatic. It's automatic. That's what it was. In the armature modifier itself, let me double check. Oh, it's because I'm doing this. Let's see if that actually is true. Let me double check. Because if you do this, there is a preserved volume. Yes. Preserved volume is here under the armature thing. But I don't know if that actually affects this thing, because this is actually just, as it is fine. Now I'm getting my because I know that for sure there was a thing that does that, but now I'm like, this is actually completely irrelevant to preserve modifier. So anyway, squash and stretch, really cool. You know what I mean? How do I scale down meshes effectively? I'm a SolidWorks user and I typically export stuff to mesh, but importing them makes them humongous in Blender. Oh yeah, you can just scale it down with the S key. That's usually what I do. Hey, how's it going? Oh my goodness. First time I've gotten to tune in live. Dude, actually, yeah. I haven't seen you around. Appreciate it. Appreciate for dropping by. Apply scale. Yeah. If you want to do so this is just a random question. I'll just answer real quick. Let's say this is like some like huge object that's like towering and looming like 1,000 meters away or whatever, right? Like this is something that's like way too big. You just take it, you just press scale, and then you just do .001, and then like it's already pretty much good to go, but you have to like find it again. If you use Alt G, it'll come back to the origin. If you still can't find it, just what you can do, let's say for example it's over here, right? And then like if you have the this is a common thing that happens with SolidWorks or 3D printing. If you do this and you scale it up by like 100, it'll start to go off into the ether. But if you scale it down, it starts to come in, right? So as long as you have the origin in the middle, it will eventually get closer and closer to the origin. You'll be able to find it at least. So you can do that. But yeah, just scaling it down like with the number pad. So I'm like actually typing in .001. You can also type it in just like the number row, and that's fine. But yeah, period .001, boom, it like scales it down. Easiest way to do it when you can't actually see the thing. Yeah. How's Soulmart coming along? It's coming along pretty well. I'm well, you'll see. I'm not gonna talk about Soulmart yet. There's a couple things that I'm gonna leave till later, but yeah, it'll be a fun time. Soulmart's going well. I'm really excited to show you guys. I think it'll be fun. White Soul, hey, welcome to the stream. Welcome. Man, I really wish you guys could hear the music, because I was playing music and it was so nice, and it was so nice to hear music, but now I can't hear music and I'm sad. Maybe I can just play it and just get copyrighted. That's the solution. That's definitely the solution. Does that work? Can you guys hear that? Yeah, that feels better, right? I like it. All right, cool. So we got squash and stretch. Curious, how is the NPR branch development situation going? I mean, it's still going. We got a lot of things still to do, but it's getting there. The thing with Blender development is that it's always like slow, because you have to constantly double check if it works in other, with the rest of Blender and everything like that. You know what I mean? The TurboTax commercial is a cover for music. Oh, thanks, TurboTax, appreciate it. So squash and stretch is pretty good. You can see that like it's kind of like it is technically a inherent principle of objects, right? Like when you want to move something and it needs to go a certain way, it's going to either squash or stretch depending on how its volume preservation tells it to go with how you want it to go. So you can see the appeal is very easy. This immediately gives you something that feels alive, because it gives it a little bit of personality. It's kind of actually how we act in general. Squash and stretch is such a great principle, actually, that if you look at human beings and when they move and when they like jump and when they like emote, a lot of their movements actually build off of this squash and stretch principle. So it is pretty cool. There is going to be a couple things that I don't like about it, but that's why it's not an S, but we'll talk about that later. But squash and stretch ultimately captures a lot of the life from a character that is able to move around and such like that. It's cool. With just squash and stretch alone, we're able to dance to music. Is that not an amazing animation principle, right? We love it. Very cool. All right, I proved my point. Squash and stretch is good. Congratulations, you've earned a spot in the A tier. Will it be a second channel video, or is it a stream exclusive? It will be a second channel video, yes, exactly. All right, next, we have timing and motion. Ooh, this is a good one. Okay, let's talk about this. Timing and motion is fundamentally, it's just timing. Let me just point out that the word timing and motion for animation is the stupidest fucking name. What do you mean motion is a principle of animation? Are you crazy? Of course it is. Also, it tells you nothing. Motion is just another synonym of animation. How could that possibly be a principle of animation? So, we're just gonna pretend that doesn't exist. I'm happy to just give them the benefit of the doubt and be like, what they meant to say was timing, okay? Sorry, Motion Okage, you're doing great. What they meant to say was timing, okay? So let's just talk about timing. What does timing mean, right? Now, timing is a really important principle. Now, what it means essentially is that the speed in which you put like drawings together will affect the speed in which they're perceived. So like timing makes sense as a principle. It allows you to have different levels of fidelity, different levels of like energy as well. Like you can see here between these two, it's actually the same exact speed of things happening, but the number of drawings have decreased. Therefore, you have a different energy behind the animation, right? Really, really cool, right? Very interesting. Now, am I listening to a commercial? What is this? Oh my God, is this? Oh my God, you're joking me. You're joking me. There's literally a TurboTax. Oh my God, there's literally a TurboTax commercial. Did you summon that? Where did the TurboTax commercial come from? Oh my God, Lava, you're crazy. I actually feel like you did something. You cursed my PC. I don't know where that came from. Okay, anyway. That wasn't there before. It's just passed on like a disease. Yeah, for real. Okay, anyway. Oh, sorry, the yeet is not working right now. My bad. Sorry, guys. Yeet's not currently working. I gotta let you guys know. As a disclaimer, don't waste your points on it. It is currently out of commission. I'll fix my stream one day, guys. My stream is still like it's a work in progress. All right, we're figuring this out. Okay. So, timing. Is timing a good principle or not? Now, this boils down to whether or not you can understand it. So, what does the word timing mean? Now, this is a very interesting interpretation of the timing principle. Does timing mean how many drawings you do? No. No, it doesn't. There's nothing to do with that. The word timing has nothing to do with how many drawings you make, because as you can see, the timing of these drawings is exactly the same. The speed of these balls are exactly the same. So the word timing to describe this principle makes no sense. Okay? It makes no sense. If someone told me, oh, timing's important, I'd be like, no fucking shit, but what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? It's like, oh, you gotta draw differently. That doesn't make any sense either. Okay? So we're gonna say for a fact that timing does not properly describe how many drawings you should have. That, frankly, in my opinion, doesn't make sense. Now, to be fair, I'll give a quick disclaimer. Technically speaking, this does come from the era of 2D animation, in which case, like, the frame rate, quote unquote, was kind of like 24 FPS or whatever back in the West. Like, Disney kind of made it that way, and they kind of like the stupid thing is that like they kind of just drew a lot of frames. And like, I guess technically if they drew like a copy of the frame or like whatever it is, like it doesn't make any sense because they didn't really do that many holds back then, right? So it's like, arguably in 2D, you have to like, you know, the number of drawings that you copy, I guess, in between kind of matters to a little bit of a degree. But like for 3D animation and for animation as a concept, like that doesn't really play into it. It's like, it's really confusing. I'm still confused. I'm still confused right now. Is your course still available for Blender? Yes, I mean, it should be. It's on Bloop. It's on Bloop Animation. About a few years ago, when I go to the Bloop, I can't access the videos. You should mention that to them. They should be aware of that. Definitely let them know that you can't access the videos. Yeah, they should be able to. All right, I'm gonna look this up real quick. So I want to look up timing animation principle, YouTube, and we're just gonna, because I genuinely want to see if I can understand this a little bit better, right? Animation Mentor has like a thing about it. Let's see. Oh my God, there's another ad. Oh my God, there's another ad. Please. Oh, please, for the love of... Okay. All right. So, let's see here. What does... You guys, timing is everything. Oh, is it? I thought it was only 1/12 of the number. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. What do you mean timing is everything? That doesn't make... This is not very helpful. Who did that? Wooster, hey, thanks. Thanks for subscribing, guys. Oh my God. Thank you. Wooster with the Prime. Oh my God. 13 months. You're on a 1-month streak. That's crazy. It's almost like I haven't streamed in 6 months. No, has it been more? No, it's been about 6 months. Almost maybe 5 months. Yeah. Anyway, screw this. Screw this timing is everything crap. That's bullshit. I'm sorry. That's just... No principle should be everything. Unless it's everything. If it covered everything, you wouldn't... You're not covering anything, are you? Anyway, let's keep going. Okay, blah, 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 a lot of words. Timing involves a few simple principles. Wait, I thought timing was a principle. What do you mean it contains a few? How quickly something moves and how long it stays still. Okay, yeah, that's fair. That's valid. So how quickly something moves and how long it stays still. Now, keep in mind that like things don't move in animation. You're just technically doing drawings, right? You're just doing all still frames. So it's really just like how long it stays still. That's really the main thing. So it's actually just one principle technically. So that's wrong. Anyway, let's see. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Timing, it makes sense, but like, what does it mean? I will flip these drawings, get a sense. Okay, slow, and then I'll work breakdown with general rule of thumb being a slow in and slow out. Wait a minute, slow in or slow out? Wait, hang on. What do you mean as a general rule of thumb for timing, you use slow in and slow out? I thought slow in and slow out was another principle of animation. Are you using a principle of animation to use another principle of animation? Hang on a second. Hang on a second. These are the same thing. These are the same principle. What the heck? Bro, there's literally the fucking same. It's the same thing. Okay. Okay. So, I've gone on long enough. One, timing is a terrible name for this. It's so broad of a term that it doesn't really give you an idea of what it means, right off the bat. So it's not really well defined. Now, does it mean how many drawings you need to make? Sure. Maybe. We don't even know because we're not even sure. Because like how do, if you like, are you holding? Anyway, it doesn't make sense, right? But then also slow in and slow out is just an execution of timing, right? It is really just, it's just a version of timing. It's sort of like, hey, timing's important. How? Well, for example, you slow in and slow out. Well, the example can't be a principle of animation. That doesn't make sense, right? Timing is one of those things that requires a lot of other principles to even function. So it's, yes, exactly. Yes. It doesn't stand on its own as a principle. It is a concept, sure, but like it doesn't actually, it doesn't create animation in and of itself as an element that can stand alone, right? So I'm gonna put timing in D tier, okay? You know what? No. We'll give it C tier. It has some elements. I'm gonna make this F tier. We're gonna reserve that for later, okay? It's like timing is a category and everything else is a subgenre, but then when you make it a principle, it's like, but everything else can do this. Yes, it makes no sense, right? So already in C tier, I give it not an F tier simply because the concept of making sure that you have, sorry, hang on. I think the correct term is spacing. So if we were to rename, because I've seen this before, right? If we look up spacing animation principle, let me just double check. Timing and spacing. So some people realize that timing is a terrible fucking name for it and just start, oh, wait. Never mind. I've given the world too much credit, clearly. Okay, hang on. Okay, so what is the timing and spacing principle in animation? So like, this is the thing that we were actually not allowed to see because AnimOST has been apparently 404, so we can't see that. But as far as my memory is aware, hopefully at least more than one website has referenced timing and spacing together, because I think that spacing is a better name for the same thing. As you can see here, right? This is called spacing here, right? Now, anyway, maybe I'm just being too hopeful. But anyway, assuming that timing and spacing are one and the same, I put it in C tier because spacing as a concept is a pretty important principle, right? It's just terribly named as timing and motion. So like, if you were to name it spacing, it deserves kind of a slot of validity, right? So fair enough. Spacing is important. Cool. As a follow-up though, slow in and slow out, F tier. Doesn't deserve to exist. we kill that one, right? We all agree that that doesn't deserve to have its own principle. It's just an execution of timing and spacing, right? It's quite literally an example of another principle. That doesn't make it a principle, right? Stupid. Okay? Let's just call it what it is. That shit's stupid. Okay? Okay. Now, let's move on. Okay. We can move on. Thank God we can move on. Where does tempo fit in as a principle? Is it a part of timing or should it be in its own category? That's an interesting question. tempo, interestingly enough, tempo and like rhythm, right? Not on here. Doesn't exist. That's not a principle of animation according to the 12 principles of animation. 12 principles of animation. Now, is tempo and rhythm important for animation? Am I listening to a commercial right now? Yes. The answer to both of those questions, yes. Tempo and rhythm are very important for animation, and I believe that they deserve a spot as a principle. But do they exist? No, they do not. But we'll talk about whether it fits into one of these subcategories as a thing. Okay, we'll see if it does. Well, as we get through it. But yeah, very interesting point to bring up. Very interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. So now moving on, we go to the next one. Anticipation. Anticipation, baby. This is actually probably my favorite animation principle of all time. This is genuinely a goated animation principle. Anticipation, immediately S tier. Why do I like this principle so much? Anticipation is the concept of bringing people into the know of what's about to happen. It's actually a psychological effect. It's really, really cool. And what it does is it preempts a movement. So it tells you what's about to happen without showing what's about to happen. It's kind of like foreshadowing. And by doing that, it actually builds our sort of like, quite literally, anticipation of what's about to happen, the movement that's going to happen. And by doing that, it makes it all the more satisfying. Anticipation is kind of like, it's the concept of setup and payoff. It's actually a fundamental principle of life, not just animation. Anticipation can be, if you describe it as the concept of setup and payoff, it is also a foundation and principle of storytelling. It's also a foundation and principle of music. It's a foundation and principle of comedy. It's a foundation and principle of like almost everything that has to do with the human experience, especially art, right? So anticipation is actually an S tier principle. I think this definitely deserves a spot somewhere in the principles of animation. How it takes form, we'll talk about that. But anticipation is an incredibly important principle, and I approve. I approve of this one. This is good. It's got a little stamp next to it. It's great. Dark Souls bosses holding their attacks while the player's spamming dodge. Exactly. It's the foundation of gaming as well. It's really, really important, right? 12 principles of life. We'll get to that. That's the next video. All right. Cool. So we all agree anticipation is S tier. I'm hoping so. Anyway, next we go to staging. Wheatley Weasel, how's it going? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hang on, I gotta burp. Excuse me. Delicious. Okay. Next up, we have staging. Staging is an animation principle, as I can read here, presenting a scene in a way that makes it clear to the audience. Fantastic. What does that mean? Can anybody tell me what staging means in animation? Like, an example of it. You know what I mean? No. Okay. Yes. Pinku animation says silhouettes. Right. Placement of things in frame. Yes. Correct composition. Correct. Golden ratio. Thirds. Framing. Really, these are really good examples. Placement. Yes, yes, yes. The placement of things in frame. So, I've been in an ad break this whole time. Anyway, welcome back. So we're going through and we're seeing like what are examples of staging in animation. So we have golden ratio, we have framing, we have the rule of thirds, we have silhouettes. These are all really, really, really good. Now let me ask you something. How many of those have anything to do with movement? Which one of these, out of any of those examples, required movement? Right? So here's the problem with this principle. Staging is an important concept, certainly. Composition, very important. In fact, it is just composition. Staging is just a less clear word of that. Okay, let's just be clear. It's just composition, right? This is just composition. So composition is a skill set. It's important. Now, as a principle of animation, animation being the movement of things, right? It is completely separate from the concept of animation. Staging is actually a really important principle of drawing, of art, of photography, right? Staging is an important part of directing, important part of storyboarding, for example, important part of storytelling. It's an important part of like, heck, stage performances, right? It's an important thing that has nothing to do with movement whatsoever. So staging is one of these principles that I believe deserves to die. Professionally, my opinion is that it deserves to die. Now, it does exist. It is a thing, and it is important, but it has to do with the peripheral skills of animation for making a video or making an art piece, but it has nothing to do with the movement of objects or characters themselves, right? So staging, not important, completely irrelevant to us, okay? You can learn that as a separate skill. It's a totally separate skill. Cool, excellent. Today I'm learning that 12 principles of animation have more filler content than gacha games. You may be surprised. Let's move on. All right. Next we have a really interesting one. This is follow through and overlapping action. We had a really strong 1-1-1-1-1-1-1 on these. So a lot of people are really confident. Everybody seems to understand follow through and overlapping action. It's one of the 12 principles that everybody kind of references, which, by the way, if we want to talk about, like, as an animator, as we sort of like existed through this industry, I know for me personally, I only hear a few of these principles a lot. Staging, for example, is one of those that I pretty much never hear about, just as an example, right? So just pointing that out. Follow through and overlapping action, I do hear quite a bit. It's actually one of the, like, it's a very important note that keeps being given in animation dailies, for example. It's a very, very common one. Oh, let's get a bit more follow through here. Let's get a bit more overlapping action, those kinds of things, right? So do we need to learn direction? Sorry, hang on. Alex Wins All the Time has a great question. We need to learn direction, cinematography, and animation to be a great animator? Yes. Exactly my point. The 12 principles of animation are going way too hard on way too many things to pretend like you need to know this for animation. Totally separate skills. You can be a great animator without being a great director. You can be a great animator and have someone else take care of the storyboarding. It has nothing to do with you, right? That's why staging is completely irrelevant. Sorry, I wanted to finish that point because it's a great point. Anyway, follow through and overlapping action. Now, loose parts of the body continue moving after the character stops and eventually catch up. Very interesting definition. Technically, absolutely true. So follow through and overlapping action is the concept of basically drag and overshoot, right? Drag and overshoot. So drag and overshoot is, first of all, a way better name for this, okay? Let me just point that out. Can we just be completely honest? Follow through and overlapping action is the biggest mouthful for such a fundamental principle that should be easy to understand and easy to read and easy to remember. What the hell is overlapping action? What does that mean, right? What's overlapping what exactly? As a concept, are you drawing something over something else? No, not at all. In fact, technically, if you look at an overlapping concept, you're overlapping every single drawing as you ghost the previous frame. Does it have to do with overlapping action? No. So for a newcomer to animation, they'll be like, what is overlapping action? Does it have anything to do with overlapping images? No. Does it have anything to do with like two actions overlapping? Not really. It's one action technically, right? It has nothing to do with that. So yeah, the overlapping action concept, I can understand what they were trying to go for, right? If you think of the tail as having a bit of more motion and more momentum, the overlapping action is that the movement of the tail lasts a little longer but starts a little later than the movement of the body. I can see what they mean. Does that mean that it's a good name for it? No. Okay? So we're just gonna, heck, let me just be completely honest. What the hell is the difference between follow through and overlapping action? Can anyone tell me? Can anyone tell me what the difference is between follow through and overlapping action? Why did they require both of these words to describe this principle? Because as far as I'm concerned, like the overshoot, for example, of like a tail, sounds like follow through to me. You know what I mean? That sounds like follow through to me. And what I just described for overlapping action also sounds like follow through. So what is the point of having all these words when you could just say the word follow through? But follow through doesn't capture the initial drag component of it, right? So it's useless as a term as well. So, how do I feel about this? Generally speaking, I will say that this is actually a very, 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 very fundamental principle of animation. It is really important, and it's actually like a crucial thing to learn as an animator. But does it make sense? No. I think the term is terrible. I think the label is terrible. I think it makes no sense. It's a lot of words. It's completely useless as an educational term. Now, if we simply renamed it, fine. I'll give it a B. It's strong. It's strong. It's not as clear as squash and stretch. It's still important, but I'll give it a B, okay? Because the only problem that I really have with it is the name. Fair? Yeah. Some other names that you guys suggest. I mean, Inertia. Pretty good. Pretty good name, honestly. Inertia's actually real. Inertia's a really good name. Inertia is interesting, actually, because inertia captures another thing that this doesn't, which is weight. Weight is a totally separate concept. It's a totally separate concept. Weight and inertia. Inertia is a very interesting one. Now, weight as an important principle of animation. Is it on here? No. It is not. Why is weight one of the most important principles of animation, and how things can be modified in terms of how to make them feel different? That's an important principle, right? That's the concept of what makes animation unique, and then how to differentiate certain things. That weight is a big component of that. It's not on here. It's not on here at all. Weight makes things believable. Yes, it does. Weight is actually incredibly important. Mass in general, inertia in general. What a great term. Now, inertia, to be fair, inertia, if you were to bundle it in with the concept of weight, not exactly the same as follow through and overlap. Yours, hey, welcome. Thanks for following. So follow through and overlapping action is technically more so the things that are attached to stuff rather than the inertia of the main mass itself, right? So arguably the inertia of the weight and the mass itself, you could say is timing and motion, but it's not really, right? Like, you can't just say that, like, if you play something in slow motion, it's somehow more weighty. That doesn't make sense, right? It's not really timing and spacing and other. Weight is a totally separate thing, right? Would be a good time to go over what makes something a principle versus a broader general concept. Yes, very good point. So, the concept of the word principle describes it as kind of like prime numbers, is kind of how I would describe them, right? Like, prime numbers, for those of you guys who are not super familiar with like mathematics, like prime numbers are completely indivisible. So they are essentially the building blocks of all other numbers because they cannot be divided by anyone else except for itself. So like that's where you kind of get to separate different things that can't really be boiled down further as the building blocks of a concept. So like animation as a concept, as a skill, as an idea, right? Animation has to be built with the things that make it up. So like any number in mathematics can be built using prime numbers alone, right? Like that is a fact of mathematics. It's called prime factorization. Maybe I'm getting a little too nerdy here, but basically that's the concept. It's a really good illustration of what principles are. So principles should be indivisible. It's kind of like the concept of the atom, which is also an indivisible unit, right? Of course, we found out how to divide it, which is a controversial topic. But the point is, the atom is meant to be the unit that builds everything else, right? That's why we have the periodic table. The periodic table is also a really good example because it is the principal elements, right? That like kind of make up everything else, like our world and things like that, right? Now, technically, those can be divided into whatever. But like the idea is like the periodic table of elements is different types of atoms, right? So I'm listening to TurboTax again, and it's triggering me. Hang on. There we go. Much better. So, can I just, like, loop this so it doesn't... I don't know if that works. Anyway, so... You know, animation gets serious when you're learning math, physics, and chemistry. Yeah, exactly. It's the best way I could describe it, right? So, principles in general should be something that can't be boiled down further. It should be something that is, like a fundamental principle that... You can't do animation without it, for example, and you also need each and every single one of those separately, together. If that makes sense. Blaine, how's it going? Welcome back, welcome back. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Now, a concept in general is like is fine. Like concepts exist, but they don't really boil down, right? Concepts are things that can be helpful. So like an example of this is like something that is a principle is a fundamental principle. Yes, a principle is a fundamental unit of a concept that it cannot exist without. That's how I would describe it. Like so, something that is like, well, we're gonna get into it, right? So, but like we'll go. I don't want to spoil the rest of my opinions, but like staging is a good example of this, right? Staging is something that's like, this is nice to have. It's nice to learn. Is it fundamentally important for animation? No, right? It's a concept that's good. Another really good example of this is like, so for drawing, for example, I would argue that like in order to draw like humans, you have to learn anatomy, right? Like that's kind of like a principle of drawing, right? Learning anatomy is a principle. Now, can you draw without it? Yes, but you won't be able to truly understand what the 3D shape of the thing, right? That's kind of how it goes. But it's like, if you were to, let me think. And I'm talking about drawing humans in particular, of course. But like, if you were to say like, oh, like you need to give, like personality or something, is like a fundamental principle of like drawing a human being. It's like, yes, but what does that mean? And also like, how, is it like if I don't have it, like what happens? Do I not draw anymore? Like it's kind of like a weird thing where it's, or not, personality is a kind of a okay example, but it's like something where it's like, I don't know, like eye shape or something. It's like, yeah, you can learn the eye shapes as you get better, but it's like an advanced technique, you know, like different eye shapes have different kind of like personality types and stuff like that. Like concepts become so much more higher level of like, oh, this is something that's nice to learn. This is something that's like good to know, but it's not something that's like fundamental to the actual art of the thing. Yeah. Explaining shit you know is harder than people think. Also very true. Yeah. I will say it's relatively difficult to distill animation into just a couple principles. I've thought about it for a long time, and I just think that these are wrong. But like, also an important thing is that like, just this is what I understand happened, but I could be wrong. But essentially, like, the 12 animation principles were kind of something that like they kind of came up with in an interview. Now, I'm pretty sure they also consciously decided to use those things, but like these things were kind of like solidified in stone by the original Disney animators, and they were the first ones to do it. They didn't know where animation was going to go. They also were looking at it strictly from like how they were building things, which to be fair, were from scratch, right? So like staging, for example, is an important thing for them because they were also doing the storyboarding, right, on paper. But like it's technically not animation, at least not anymore, right? Like people storyboard for all sorts of things now, that kind of stuff. Yeah. You can get surprisingly good people drawings by just using stretched circles. That's true. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It's something that arises from the understanding of something fundamental. Yeah, I would say that, to be fair, like I'm not like a great artist, so I can't really say like drawing principles off the top of my head as easily as examples. But like, yeah, that's why I'm using the mathematics examples better. What is this? What is this company that this image is from? It's from The Illusion of Life, but I don't know Lachina developing living content. I don't know who that is. I have no idea who this is. The GIF that keeps coming up. Yeah. We should normalize tipping culture for teachers. That's crazy. Damn. You know, that's literally bribery. I'm pretty sure that, I mean, you're not wrong, but also like, I'm pretty sure like it does technically happen, and that's functionally just bribery, and you can get expelled for it right now. That's probably how it goes. Anyway. Cool. Let's move on. So, are you guys good, by the way, on like understanding what a principle is? Developing living content is kind of tagline. You see it in mascot horror, putting souls into their media. True. True. Sort of. Yeah, no, that's fair. I want, so the thing is, at the end of this, I want to give some ideas of what my principles are. I don't have, I want to refine them a bit more, but I have like my sort of concept of what principles are, and I'll give you an example of what an actual principle of animation should feel like, right? So I'll show you guys that later. But anyway, for now, we move on. So next is straight ahead and pose to pose. Straight ahead and pose to pose, principle of animation. So let's talk about what this is. Now, a lot of people can understand what the definition of straight ahead and post to pose is, because people learn it in school. And this is actually one of the ones that's actually referenced a lot too. Straight ahead and post to pose is referenced all the time in animation studios and stuff like that for like how things should be made and things like that. And it's two different workflows. Straight ahead is drawing a scene by starting out at the beginning and going to the end. Pose to pose draws out major actions, then fills in the rest. Cool. So we understand that these are two different workflows on how to animate. Really, really cool. Really, really cool. So, like, what about other workflows, like layered animation? Is that a principle of animation? What about like using the graph editor? Is that a principle of animation? What about like having someone else draw for you? Is that a principle of animation? Right, the in-betweeners, right? Technically that's part of pose to pose, but like, is tweening a separate part of that is technically also a principle of animation? Because it should be, right? I mean, straight ahead and pose to pose are technically principles. Like, shouldn't it also include tweening as a principle of animation? Because it's actually very important. But it's a totally separate process. So, are these principles or just techniques? Very good question. Alex wins all the time. Yeah, these are just workflows. These are just different approaches to the same problem. Correct. These are just different ways to achieve animation. Sure. But there's so many workflows, right? Layered animation is such a great example. This is, of course, came much, much later than this, sheet was invented. So like, I don't blame them for thinking there was only two at the time, especially with 2D. But like, layered animation is a concept. It's a workflow that was invented by a Pixar animator. Right. There's also Cascador, right? That's also true. Is physical simulation-based animation also a principle of animation, right? It starts to get really, really muddy. So layered animation, if you guys don't know, layered animation is a really, really cool concept, and I wish I could demonstrate it, but I'm not super good at it because it's a relatively advanced technique, but like it's a very, very common thing that people do nowadays, which is the concept of like you create like a cycle, right? Where you like, I wish I had enough bones for this, but like you create like a cycle or not even a cycle, just like a curve, right? And you go into the graph editor and you essentially just take this curve here. Let's say it's only on one axis, right? And you actually just copy this curve onto like the Z axis. And then you're like, okay, so I know that this curve is where I want it to be, but I want it to like offset it a little bit. And now you have a circle, right? And then you take that and you go here to the X axis, and then you copy it again, but you're like, okay, I want to like offset it this way a little bit. And now you have like another kind of like really appealing motion. You can see here, if you actually take the initial curve that you make, you can actually take that curve and duplicate it almost on every single axis and every single body part for like a character. And it actually becomes like the Pixar animator who demonstrated this, I forget his name now, I'll look it up real quick. But he actually animated like a Pixar level animation with incredibly high detail in like 10 minutes. It's incredible, right? So this is a totally separate workflow that is not straight ahead or pose to pose, notably, right? It's neither one of those. Let's see what he's called. Does he have a name? Who invented it? No, go away. Where's the actual information I need? Layered animation inventor at Pixar. It's not John Lasseter. There we go. Mike Wakares. And look it up. It's got to be this guy. Yeah, Mike Wakaretz's layered animation. No, actually, I don't think it's this guy at all. Oh, no, it is. Yeah. Never mind. Does anybody know who Mike Wakaretz is? I want to give him credit. Here we go. I'm pretty sure it is Mike, because I've heard his name before. Yeah. Yeah. Micro what micro Makarewicz. Rewich. Anyway, you get the idea. Yeah, it's not Pete Docter. He's an animator. A director. I don't know if he actually animates now that I think about it. I think he does, but yeah, Pete is the director of Finding Nemo and Good Dinosaur. And John Carter, but that's a yeah, that's we don't talk about that one. Yeah, he created Render Man and the Toy Story. Oh, cool. I didn't. Did he direct Toy Story? I think that was Tom Lasseter, wasn't it? Or John Lasseter? Tom Lasseter? Lasseter. John Lasseter. Pete Docter directed what movies? Monsters Inc. and Up and Inside Out. Really? Damn, he did a lot of them. And Soul as well. Wow, look at that. Look at that. These are totally different. These are producers. Okay. Where's the writer? Director? That's crazy. He doesn't even put the director on there. Yeah, so this is Soul. Yeah, Soul. Inside Out. Up. Monsters Inc. Where's Finding Nemo? Did I hallucinate that? Oh, but he was a writer. He was a writer for Toy Story. Writer for Toy Story 2. Writer for Monsters Inc. Did he not do Nemo? Am I crazy? What? Wait, who did Finding Nemo? Sorry guys, this is a total random tangent. I need to find out. It's Andrew Stanton. There we go. That's who it was. Whoops. Sorry, buddy. My bad. Gotta get our facts straight. I tried to find a pronunciation for that last name and I got the crunchiest audio of Micah Ribbits. Okay, Micah Ribbits it is. Micah Ribbits. All right, so. So, with that in mind, layered animation is a perfect example of why straight ahead and pose to pose don't really deserve a spot in the principles of animation themselves. Now, I will put them in C tier simply because technically speaking, they are important as workflows specific to animation, right? So technically, it is like a fundamental aspect of like the animation process. But you can't put workflows in the principles because it just becomes crazy. You might as well just say, there are some workflows. Learn them. You know what I mean? So, but I put it in C tier for now because, you know, admittedly, it's one of the more common ones that people talk about. So fair enough. Actually, no, I fucking hate it. We're gonna kill it now. Straight ahead and post pose does not exist. It is dead now. It's dead to me. I will never look at it again. All right, cool. Slow. Well, the thing is, if it doesn't belong, it should be an F. I really can't. I can't keep it there in good conscience. Yeah, I'm sorry. It doesn't exist. But yeah, straight ahead and post pose, they are legitimate workflows. You should learn them, but they are under a separate type of like workflow list. Really. Yeah. Yeah, layered animation is not the best name, like follow through. I totally agree. If we can just rant for a second about the concept, whoever named layered animation, which is probably Micah Ribbits, but this Michael guy, layered animation is so confusing because every time I've ever talked about it, people are like, "Oh, you mean like animation layers?" When I say it is the most confusing thing to explain. It is not animation layers. It is layered animation. It is totally different. It is completely unrelated. There are no layers in layered animation. There's no layers. But I don't know what to call it either, to be honest. Yeah. I think the principles is mixing fundamentals and techniques. Yes, correct. Thank you. That's a great way to explain it. Yeah. Fundamentals and techniques are two separate concepts. Yes, exactly. Precisely. Yeah. We do need a different name for layered animation, but you know, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out eventually. I think the pronunciation is supposed to be more Makaruwich. Makaruwich. All right, fair enough. Makaruwich. Michael Makaruwich. Yeah, fair enough. Hierarchical animation. Maybe, kind of, like, or maybe just like curve-based manipulation, copying of 2 different channels-based animation. Like, maybe that's good. I don't know. It's such a hard, it's honestly a really difficult concept in general to understand, so it's weird. Kind of reminds me of how English language made hamburger, but it's not made of ham. Yeah, true. Very true. All right. Now, we've already done slow in and slow out, so we can skip this one. We've killed this one. It's dead, it doesn't exist. So let's move on to arcs. Arcs is next. Let's talk about arcs. Is layered animation specific to 3D? Yes and no. It technically is in terms of like the actual the concept of the curves, but layered animation technically also refers to the fact that you work from the center of gravity and then you go outwards from there. So you can go, you animate the hip first, and then you animate the chest, and then you animate the head. So like, and then the limbs, right? So like that concept is kind of where the term layered comes from, rather than the curves themselves. The curves is an execution technique of that layered process. But like the curves themselves is a 3D specific workflow because you can only do that in the graph editor. But going from the hip to the chest to the head, that can totally be done in 2D, 100%. Yeah, core first. That's actually how I tend to animate. If you guys remember back when I used to animate on stream, you'd see like the noodly arms going around everywhere because I would drag the hip like across the nation, and then the arms would be left behind because I'm like not even worrying about them right now. And like I'll just ignore that in my head and I'll just animate the hip motion, and then I'll animate the rest of the body with it. So like that actually is an execution of the concept of layered animation, but it's not using the curve method of it. It's just the concept of it. So like it gets even more confusing when you think about like how that goes. But technically, yes, layered animation can refer to 2D as well. It's kind of like, arguably it could be straight ahead or pose to pose, but the concept is that you're doing different body parts at different times. So it's totally separate from both of those techniques, and it could still be applied to 2D, which by the way, it has been. Like I've seen people do it before where they'll animate the hip as a ball first, and then they'll like animate the rest of it as like the next ball, but it won't actually fit cleanly into straight ahead or pose to pose, but they just like ignored that fact and we're like, yeah, whatever. So it has happened in 2D before too. Like it's not like it's totally unique to 3D, but yeah. Cool. All right. So let's talk about arcs, shall we? And let me change the song because it's been looping for like a while and I'm tired of it. All right, what's a good one? This one. Oh no, a commercial. I've been had. Here we go. Yeah, there we go. Have you used OpenTunes before? I have not. I mean, it's like an open 2D animation software, I think. I don't know. I use Blender for everything. Blender is also an open 2D animation software. Is it really important to have arcs everywhere? Because sometimes it doesn't require to add it. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. Does layered animation apply to non-humanoid characters, objects whatsoever? Yes, it does. Layered animation refers to anything that has a center of gravity, which is literally everything, right? So like, generally speaking, you want to start with that center of gravity. Now, of course, if it doesn't have, for example, like consciousness, right? If you're animating something that is like physics-based, arguably, layered animation is still relevant because you have essentially all the secondary animation that comes after that, right? Like whatever's attached to it. That's technically the same thing, right? You animate the ball before the tail. That's an execution of layered animation as well. Yeah. Get U-Block Origin? It got discontinued. I actually just looked it up and it was like, hey, this add-on's been removed because like it's been like stopped or something. I don't think it works anymore. That's why I'm using Brave right now, because Brave actually has block built into it. Although I can't use it for the music because I have it set up on specifically listening to Chrome. Oh, Firefox browsers. Silly me. You're right. I haven't used Firefox. Okay, now let's talk about arcs. Action should follow an arc to give them a better flow. Fair enough. What are arcs? Arcs, if you guys understand, is basically just parabolas, right? So arcs is a really cool concept because technically speaking, it refers to the fact that everything kind of like follows a curve rather than a straight line, right? Like that's kind of the concept of arcs. I don't know how I feel about arcs. I'll be completely honest with you guys. I don't know how I feel about arcs because it is important. So arcs as a concept kind of they capture a lot of things. They capture pivot points, which is a fundamental part of a lot of animation, right? They capture gravity, which manifests as a parabola, right? It captures like appealing shapes and stuff like that, which is all curves. Right? It captures a lot of things, but it also captures so many things that are unrelated to each other, oftentimes, while at the same time doesn't capture straight lines. That's kind of weird, right? It's like, hey, like this is like an important thing, but also like only when you need it, because sometimes you don't. Because sometimes you do just want a car to go straight on a road. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need an arc for a car going straight on a road. Like the car is just going straight, and it's animated, but you don't need arcs. You don't need to understand what arcs are to know that you want to go straight on a road. Am I crazy? So like it doesn't, like you don't have to understand it to animate. Like it doesn't make sense, right? Like you can animate something at a really high level for a car going straight on a road. So like you don't really need arcs for everything. So it's one of these things that feels like a concept rather than a fundamental principle. It's a concept that's nice to know, right? It encaptures a lot of things. It's generally, as a rule of thumb, like useful, right? But that's why, like, if nothing else, the 12 animation principles could easily be named as the 12 animation things that are kind of useful, I guess. Right? Because that would be a much better explanation of what the principles of animation actually are. Because the arcs is a good example of this, where it's like, that is kind of useful as like a rule of thumb, like generally speaking, kind of. But also not all of these are rule of thumbs. So it's just like the thing that's kind of useful. And this other thing is also kind of useful. So arcs are just like, they're in that weird spot where it's like, yes, you do have a lot of like utility there, but it doesn't really apply to like everything. Compare that to squash and stretch, for example, right? Squash and stretch can be applied to almost every type of animation, any type of movement at all, right? Like it's actually very, very, very important for like most things. It applies to humanoid things. It applies to like rigid bodies. It applies to like static. It applies to basic shapes. You can get a cube and give it some squash and stretch, and it feels like it's alive. Like these are things that like squash and stretch applies to pretty much everything, right? So, in comparison, arcs. Yeah, I give it a C. I give it a C because I do really like the fact that it is useful, right? It is useful. I'm not gonna deny that. It is useful to know. But it really cannot be given so much importance that it starts to override people's inherent intuition on how to animate something, right? Like that's the problem, right? So we actually had a really good question earlier where it's like, are arcs always useful in like, is it really important? This is God of Spirit. It's a great question. Is it really important to have arcs everywhere? Because sometimes it doesn't require to add it, or it's not required to add it to my scene. And that's very, very true. And the problem is that if somebody were to take the concept of arcs and apply it as a principle of animation and be like, this needs to be in my animation. If it's not in my animation, I'm doing it wrong. Then they're gonna mess up. It's actually gonna make their animation worse because it's gonna look too loosey-goosey. It's not gonna be accurate to their vision. It's not gonna be accurate to what they need to have for that scene. Sometimes you do just need a straight line. Let me ask you something. Look at this this timing and motion thing. Like, where's the arc in this, right? I mean, you could argue that maybe the arc is in the curve of the graph editor, but it's like there's no graph editors in 2D animation, right? So like, how are you? You know what I mean? There's no graph editors in 2D animation, so there's no curve that's visibly there. So these arcs don't make any sense. Like it doesn't have an immediate applicable thing that people can inherently understand to apply to their work in a way that won't ruin it. You know what I mean? So that's my opinion. I think arcs is more important in 3D. I don't think it's any more or less important in either one. I think they're both important. Arcs are still important in both 2D and 3D for sure. But it's just like, it's not something that is like, you know, it's something that one isn't explained very well, to be fair, but also it's so all encompassing that you can't really boil it down to anything further than just arcs, because like various things follow arcs for various reasons, right? Like a pivot point of like, so if I raise my arm, for example, or if I do this, right? This is an arc. This arc is appealing and it works because my pivot point is my ass, right? Because I'm sitting on my ass and I'm doing this, right? So there's a pivot point that has to do with like how my movement is happening. But if I jump up and I fall down, it has nothing to do with my ass at all. It has to do with gravity, right? Now my ass is listening to gravity, but it's not the pivot point of gravity, right? So like the parabola that you take when you jump up and down, and the pivot point that you have when you pivot on like any kind of joint, your arm or whatever, or your neck, totally different reasons for this happening. But they both manifest as arcs. Now they're slightly different arcs, to be fair. Some of them, like the parabola of gravity, is different from this more circular arc of a pivot point, right? So that's also unclear. You know what I mean? So it doesn't really help. It's one of those things that's like kind of nice to know, but it doesn't really help. In fact, it could actually hinder someone if they apply it in a way that doesn't make sense. The 12 principles were definitely designed in the era of early animation where we're hiring people for 2D animation who have no prior art experience. Well, they have to have prior art experience, but yes, they have no prior animation experience for sure. Like the concept of animation was never really taught before. And it was really, honestly, it was really just people who kind of had a talent for it. And like, that's kind of how things get built in the first place. And this happens, by the way, I should mention this because I've learned a lot of different skills in my life. The 12 principles of animation being complete and total ass is not a unique experience. And what I mean by that is like, you can look at like a lot of different things like writing, for example, and you'll see like the 12 principles of writing, which don't exist, but like you look at the principles of writing, and they're written by people who are really talented, who understand something really innately, and they have no god-awful idea how to truly explain what they intuitively know, and so they just kind of list off things that are kind of important, and like that's fine, but to understand it from the ground up, it's really difficult to go from like knowing nothing to understanding everything with coming from someone who never knew nothing. You know what I mean? So a lot of like animators, for example, who started out, they were the talented ones who just kind of understood motion, and they like, it's difficult to explain this, right, in a sort of building block manner when they intuitively understand everything already. So I totally understand why this is happening. So no shade to the people who made this. It was a hard thing to do, but complete shade to the actual principles themselves. So yeah, if only the go-to animators of old were as good at naming conventions. I agree. Yeah. Is it actually important to look at the ass? Yes, genuinely. To be very clear, it is. Lummy BT, welcome. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the last short. It was a fun little clip from the Patreon stream, actually. Yeah, the Patreon stream, I tend to go on rants. Looking at the ass was a rant that I happen to have stored in the sphincter somewhere. The sphincter of Twitch clips. That yeah. So why is the ass important to look at? It's because the ass is the center of gravity. So the center of gravity dictates weight. It dictates balance. Yes, we have Patreon only streams. Yeah, we have them on Discord. And in fact, the Patreon only streams are actually where I review animations that you guys submit. So like on Patreon, we have like a tier that you can submit animations, and I will go through and I don't watch all of them, but I'll go through a roulette each month, and I'll review I think 3 or 4 of them each time, and we'll go over them, and I'll go in detail of like, you know, how we can improve each animation, like in all these things. It's a lot of fun actually. And we talk about like concepts in general. A lot of people join. You don't have to submit anything to join the streams. Like people just watch. People who are just generally on Patreon, all of them can just watch the streams. So yeah, it's really nice. Yeah. Taylor's got the link for us. But yeah. So anyway, I digress. This is way longer of a stream than I was planning. So I'm getting to a point where I've been ranting for too long. So yes, arcs are a thing. But yes, the Patreon has a Discord that we stream on. It's cool. I like to run animation myself. The problem is I use Unity and not Blender. That's fair, but you can pick up Blender. I mean, it's a free software. But yeah. Shouldn't it still be the same, just a different software? Yeah, exactly. It just depends. I mean, Unity doesn't actually have animation tools, to be fair. Not very good ones. They have, yeah, not very good ones. Unreal has some animation tools, I heard, but like, generally speaking, you want to use an animation software to animate because it has a lot of tools that make it easier, but yeah. For only $10, you can rent your own little personal Dillon. That's actually true. That's technically true, yeah. I sit on your shoulder, I talk about your animation, how it could be better. But yeah, okay, so we've given arcs the fate of justice. I think they are in now C tier. So let's move on to exaggeration. Now, exaggeration. Cool. what does exaggeration do for us? Now, it basically takes everything else that exists and says like, hey, like, do all of the things that I said, but just like more of it, right? That's how I can describe exaggeration, because exaggeration really is just it's just a modifier of something that's already there. It isn't really in and of itself like a thing, right? So what does it mean? Like, think about it this way, right? Like, let's say that you're an anime and you're animating, hypothetically. And you're like, okay, did I use all 12 principles of animation in my animation? And you look at it and you're like, okay, I did squash and stretch. I did timing and spacing. I did anticipation. Heck, I did staging. I did follow through and overlap. I animated in straight ahead. I'm doing slow in and slow out. I've got arcs going on. And, oh, wait. Exaggeration. Did I do exaggeration? Well, technically I could exaggerate it more. I mean, I thought I already did with the anticipation, but I guess I could exaggerate it even more, and then you exaggerate it more, and then you look at it and you're like, well, it is exaggerated, but technically I could exaggerate it more. Like, technically I could. And so like the concept of exaggeration is really like, it just means to do more of what you have, but also what if what you have is already exaggerated, and like what if what you have is like too far already and you actually need to do less of it, then suddenly exaggeration isn't really like a thing that you have to do. It's just a note. That's like, think about that, guys. Exaggeration is literally just a note. It is just a note that is given to animators who don't exaggerate enough. I think that's it. That's all it is. And it's fine. It's useful, right? To understand that you can exaggerate things. But also, like, it only applies to people who don't exaggerate things enough, really, right? Like, that's what it means. Yeah, like it, because if you, but to be fair, let's be fair, right? In the original creation of these principles, where nobody was 2D animating, people don't really understand the difference between animation and like live action stylization. Now, my issue with that, of course, is that, like, technically speaking, you can animate something that is actually relatively realistic and it can look beautiful. And we see this in anime. Anime has some, like, really gorgeous Sakuga shots that are just really slice of lifey, and there's basically no exaggeration at all. Like, there's a little bit of, like, smoothness and stuff to it, but, like, it's not really exaggerating the movement very much. It's actually very realistic and lifelike, and it actually looks gorgeous as animation. This is something that's more common in the East rather than in the West. And, like, if that's possible to do animation with, then is it really a principle of the concept of movement? Not really, right? Like, exaggeration is more of a principle of Western animation, absolutely. Because Western animation does rely heavily on its differentiation from the seriousness of, like, you know, live action film and drama. But, like, funnily enough, in Eastern animation, anime actually covers a lot of serious topics, and actually there's a lot of slice of life and a lot of, like, dramas that are fully animated that don't have necessarily a lot of exaggeration. They can use it as a tool, yes, but is it a principle of animation? I don't know. By doing all the other stuff, we're already exaggerating, so it's more like good advice. Yes, exactly. Yes, great point. Like, anticipation is actually a really good example of exaggeration, right? Like, in real life, sometimes we don't have anticipation, or we don't show anticipation, but, like, if you want to show the anticipation, you kind of have to already exaggerate what is barely kind of already there in real life. Yeah. Is it more like you can do an animation because it isn't real life, so exaggeration? I mean, kind of, yeah. Like, in the West, we kind of, like, took animation as, hey, we have to differentiate it. Whereas in the East, it was more just like an additional type of medium. Yeah, like it wasn't like a thing that specifically had to be different from the existing stories that people already told. It's weird. It's interesting because, like, in anime, you get a lot of stories that they never had to be animated in the first place, and they are, and that's just how they chose to tell the story. Whereas in the West, you never get that. In almost every single Western animation that you see, it's like Toy Story, for example. It's like the only way to have created that piece was through animation, because, you know, you can't have real toys that are alive. You know what I mean? Yeah. Old Looney Tunes cartoons, I've noticed avoid motion blurring. Yeah, that's actually that's squash and stretch and smears, technically. So smears are actually in my opinion, smears are a really important part of animation that you could argue is like, should be on here, but whatever. Anyway, that being said, exaggeration is definitely not a principle. F tier. It can't possibly be any higher than that. I'm sorry. Exaggeration is not useful as a principle. It's fine as like good advice. It's like, okay, great. That's a useful thing to take to heart as like a thing that I could do if I wanted to, especially if I decided to go down that particular stylization route. But otherwise, why do I need to know the concept of exaggeration? It is a simple word that tells me if it's good or bad relative to where you want it to be, right? It doesn't say anything about how animation itself works. It ends as a choice. Yes, exactly. Exaggeration is merely a choice. It's a stylistic decision, right? Extra credit, exactly. So, stop motion puppeteering. That's fair. Technically, that's a form of animation. Technically, that's a form of animation. I'll tell you that much. But yeah, secondary action. All right, here we go. So, secondary action. Hang on. Do I have? Yes. Okay. Cool. All right. Secondary action is. Can anybody tell me what secondary action is, actually? Can anybody tell me the definition of secondary action? Now, it says here, a second action in the scene to complement the main action. But, you'll notice in the example, it is... that second ball is bouncing because the first ball lands, right? Pinku animation, that's a great example. Jiggles. Jiggles as secondary action. Very, very cool. Secondary action. Very, very interesting. But wait a minute. Reaction happens, it affects the others. Action, reaction, which is basically the same as follow through. So we get right into it. Jiggles, reactions. This is just follow through and overlapping action. Hair, tails, trinkets, accessories, earrings. It's just drag and overshoot. It's just physics. What is going on? Hang on a second. Everybody's saying that secondary action is like the jingles and the extra little doodads and stuff that like happen on like my hair and stuff, right? That's secondary action, correct? Wrong. So this is actually interesting. This is one of the most misunderstood principles of animation. Secondary action is not to be confused with secondary animation. These are two different concepts that constantly get confused. Constantly. They are totally separate. Secondary animation refers to follow through and overlapping action. This is why there's such a confusion. Yes, secondary animation refers to the secondary movements of the primary motion, right? It's a secondary animation, a secondary motion, okay? This is fucking crazy. Secondary action as a principle of animation has nothing to do with what the GIF is actually doing. So this is even misunderstood in this actual graphic, okay? Actual secondary animation. Sorry, fuck. Actual secondary action is a concept of acting. So, let me take a look at this. Let's see if there's a good example of it I can find somewhere. But, okay, so this is a good example. What is the secondary action principle? The secondary action principle refers to the additional movements that support the primary action within a scene. Let me just take a moment to talk about how ass that description is. That's a terrible definition. I hate this. It makes no sense. It's incredibly vague. I hate that definition. Cool. Now let's look at the actual example. If a character is waving, the primary action is the arm motion, but the head nodding or hair swaying in response enters the second. Okay, you almost had it right. Hair swaying is completely incorrect. That is wrong. Head nodding, yes. Head nodding is an acting thing, right? So this is what secondary action actually is. So in the actual book, Illusion of Life, where they define it, secondary action is defined as a secondary acting thing that the character is usually doing. So for example, if you're talking to a character, but you're also drinking out of a cup, this is a secondary action. The drinking of the cup is the secondary action. So the idea of secondary action is an acting tip that, like, instead of just standing there and talking, do something else at the same time. That's what secondary action means. A second action in the scene to complement the main action. That's what it means, right? You talk and then you drink and then you talk. Maybe you talk while the drink is in your, like, in front of your mouth and it's echoing a little bit. Like, that's a secondary action. It's a really, really useful tip for acting. It's really cool. It helps a lot with making things feel more real as a character and things like that. Is it a principle of animation? No, not at all. Not at all. It is a principle of acting, I think. Not a principle, it's actually still just like a tip. It's like an advice thing. It's an advice for acting. I think acting benefits a lot from this. Any actor would benefit a lot from this. In fact, there's probably some sort of advice principle list for acting that I'm not familiar with that probably includes something that means exactly the same thing as this, right? Because it's a really, really important thing. When people are acting, they're usually doing more than one thing, and that's great. That's a really, really important thing. And another example of secondary action: tapping your foot or tapping your finger when you're talking. Like, you're just a little bit more anxious, right? Like, that's really, really good. Like wiping your brow, like these things. Like, heck, maybe you're reading a book or you're writing something on the board. Like, all of this stuff that's secondary action. That's all secondary action. Yeah. Which, honestly, it makes sense when you look at the word, right? Secondary action has the word acting in it, right? So that's kind of like why it's different. That's different from the word secondary animation, which does refer to follow through and overlapping action, which is why I absolutely hate this principle. It is the most garbage, useless. Hang on. Absolute garbage. Yeah. So secondary, the action editor, that's fair. Alex wins all the time. You made a good point, and that's fair. I will agree that the wording is even worse in the fact that the name action is still not even that indicative of what it actually means. Like when they tell you to point at the crowd in public speaking instead of standing still. Yeah, honestly, kind of. Yeah, honestly, yeah. Like doing hand gestures while you're talking is considered a secondary action. Yes, actually true. Yeah. You walk around and wave your hand. Walking is secondary action. Hand waving is primary. It can be, yeah, absolutely. It depends on which one is more important for the story. The primary action is the one that's important for the story. The secondary action is the one that's important for the acting. So it depends. Like if walking is the important thing, then waving can be the secondary action. If waving is the important thing, then walking can be the secondary action. So yeah, you're totally right. It could be either or. But yeah, so that's what secondary action actually means as a principle of animation. So 1, it is not a principle of animation. 2, it is so terribly named that every single person that I know has always confused this principle for follow through and overlapping action. Nobody has ever been able to explain to me the difference because they are the same thing. They're exactly the same thing. So it is named terribly. It is incredibly confusing, and it is not even relevant to animation itself. It is relevant to acting. Each action we do technically kind of has a hierarchy of importance, so suggesting that there's only a primary and secondary does come off as a little misleading too. Yes, I totally agree. That's very, very true. So like, the idea is that I guess the advice is to do at least one more, right? So they say secondary, but I agree. Additional action would be a way better version of that, right? Like additional. That's great. I love it. Yeah. So yeah, this is probably one of the worst, the absolute worst, most absolute trash principles in there because literally everybody misunderstands it. So I'm glad I got that out of the way. Okay. Any questions about secondary action? It is now dead. It has been murdered brutally and without remorse. So it is gone. It doesn't exist. Now, to be very clear, the concept of secondary animation, which a lot of people confuse this for, is very important, and I do like it because it's the same thing as follow through and overlapping action. So for people who think I'm talking about secondary animation, I'm not killing that one. That one's fine. That one's actually pretty good. It's a really important one. But like, it is follow through and overlapping action, just with a different name. but secondary action does not deserve to be here because it's very confusing. Okay, moving on. Solid drawing. This one is interesting. We got a couple people a little confused on what solid drawing was when we did like the poll at the beginning. Solid drawing doesn't ever get mentioned. I don't think I've ever heard the word solid drawing. In fact, like I don't think anyone's ever really said like, oh, you know that principle of animation, solid drawing? Like I don't think that sentence has ever been uttered in my presence whatsoever. And I've been doing this for like 12, 13 years. So what is solid drawing exactly, right? the example here is that like they've shaded the sphere so that it looks 3D. Fine, fair enough. But like obviously you can't, like shading is not the principle, right? Clearly it's not shading, right? Yeah, that is so rare to hear. It's crazy because of how important it is. I mean, true, you're not wrong. It is surprisingly important. So let's talk about that. Understanding the basics of three-dimensional form when creating objects or characters. Interesting. Interesting. Understanding the basics of three-dimensional form when creating objects or characters. That sounds a lot like anatomy, right? That sounds a lot like anatomy. It's kind of similar to anatomy in the fact that like you have to understand the 3D shape of everything. Now anatomy goes, to be fair, when I said anatomy is the principle of drawing, it's really not. It's the solid drawing itself that is the principle. And anatomy is an extension of that, right? It is the understanding of 3D basic shapes that makes up every 2D drawing. Because you have to understand, right? And this is for 2D, for example. You have to understand how everything moves in 3D space. And then for you to accurately represent it in 2D. That's the only way, right? So like in a way it's like it's modeling, right? But it's modeling. But for 2D animators, right, this is where it came from. For 2D animators, you have to understand the 3D shape of an object. For example, a cube, like understanding how to draw a cube from multiple different angles. That's solid drawing. And the term solid drawing is so fucking bad. Like what does that mean? Like just call it three-dimensional drawing or three-dimensional understanding or something. Like what does solid drawing mean, right? Especially, to be fair, the colloquial term of solid as being like, oh, that's pretty good, didn't exist. But nowadays, if we say solid drawing, it's like, yo, dude, that drawing was pretty solid. Like, that means nothing to us. It doesn't. But anyway, regardless, solid drawing refers to the concept of 3D basic shapes and the understanding of them so that you can draw them accurately. Now, here's an important question. One, was this an important principle of animation for 2D animation? I would argue absolutely yes. 100%. 100% true. This is actually one of the most important things for drawing in general, because not only does it affect how you draw, but it also affects how you understand the movement, because the movement is going through 3D space as well. So like, for example, let's say that you have a pivot point for your thigh, right? Like your thigh is trying to go forward with that pivot point, but like if you don't understand that the thigh is trying to come towards you in camera space, you can't draw the thigh coming forward. You might draw the thigh going a little bit left, a little bit right, and that's incorrect because you don't know how to represent 3D objects in 2D space. It's a really hard thing to do. But like not knowing that means that you can't execute animation. It literally means you cannot execute what you want to execute. So solid drawing as a concept is incredibly important for 2D animation. Really, really, really fundamental and principle. Okay, so does it deserve a spot in the 12 principles of animation? Absolutely yes, when it was created. Why is it never discussed? That's an interesting question. I would argue probably because it is terribly named, but that's all I can say really. That's the only theory I have right now. But perspective and form, really, really good example of a better name for it, right? Because that's really what it is. It's perspective and form. Perspective and form is the concept of solid drawing. You just have to understand how it works. And then you ask the next question. Is it relevant for 3D animators? Is it relevant for 3D animators? This is where it gets very interesting. Because for 3D animators, there's already three-dimensional form built into the software. So your understanding of how 3D objects look and move, much less important than when you had to draw it from scratch. So there is a question. Is it important in 3D animation? Paul says, I think body dynamics also plays into this. Yes, I mean, definitely true. Because the limitations of your joints, for example, and like how things move as weight and stuff like that. True, it is relevant. Arguably, that's a slightly different thing in terms of like the mechanics themselves, like how the joints work. But like, arguably, you could say it's kind of the same concept of understanding the fundamental principles of how something moves. But we'll get into exactly how that ties into maybe another principle or something like that. But yes, it is relevant. Let's see. Is understanding 3D dimensional form important when 3D animating? We have, it is very much so even, yes. I'd say you have to understand the rig, right? Okay. If we talk about solid drawing, it's a job for shaders, not for animators themselves. Interesting. Technically speaking, that's the confusing thing about this graphic, and probably a lot of other. The fact that this name solid drawing in the first place, it has nothing to do with shading whatsoever. So it has nothing to do with shaders either. So technically, I wouldn't even count that. I feel like it's important in any form of art. Fair enough. Perceivable form is still important in 3D. I'd say yes. For 3D animation, it could be like believable poses, maybe. This is kind of relevant to the body dynamics point. Yes, true. I've always thought of this as videography, making poses in the third axis and such. Interesting. Okay. But it's interesting because, like, technically speaking, like, we talked about silhouette in the staging phase, right? Silhouette and, like, posing and like, staging something with, like, proper silhouette in 3D is sort of like going from 3D to 2D. And then this is, going from 3D to 2D if you're doing 3D. And this example of solid drawing is kind of going from, like, 2D to 3D, right? In a lot of ways. And if you start with 3D and you're going to 3D, how does this work? So here's my opinion. This is a really tricky thing to do because at the end of the day, like, the reality of, like, the basic concept of solid drawing is that you understand the 3D shape of things. And if you want to move something forward or whatever, like, you can change the angle of what you have to look at and you can kind of just, like, do the thing. And to be completely honest, it does blow away a lot of the requirements for understanding the 3D shape of an object in the same way that you did for 2D. But there's a very specific use case that 3D animators still need this for, in my opinion. And that is for reference. Reference is still an incredibly important part of 3D animation and 2D animation. And if you don't understand the 3D shape of what you're referencing, which is usually a flat 2D video, you won't be able to fully understand the movement that you're doing. So in a lot of ways, like, and this is not just reference that's in 2D, it also includes reference that you see in real life, right? So if you can't capture the 3D form of something in real life in your head that you can then use and reference in your head, then doing it in 3D in the software is also more difficult, right? So, like, in my opinion, it is much less important than it was for 2D, but it's still incredibly important for truly understanding the level of animation that you need to do. So for example, like, if you wanted to do an animation where you just copy, like, you know, a pose, but you have, like, reference from something that is, like, from a slightly different angle, you would not be able to create that animation with that reference if you didn't understand solid drawing, if you didn't understand 3D form. So absolutely, I think it's important. Do I think that it is a principle of animation? It's tough. It's really tough because, one, it has to be renamed 100%. The name is a total ass. But let's say we rename it to perspective and form, right? Would this be broadly more like observation skills? True. I mean, true. Yeah, observation is absolutely a key skill for animation. Yes. So maybe, definitely true. But observation is a little too vague. So maybe, like, perspective and form being the things that you want to focus on, perhaps could be a version of solid drawing, or something along those lines, right? Where it talks about the 3D form of a thing. So perspective and form, is that a principle of animation? It's not all-encompassing enough. I think we have to broaden it a little bit, but the observation is a little too broad. Perhaps there's something in between where we can come up with a name for it that properly captures what I'm talking about, which is kind of similar to the body dynamics thing, where you understand 3D movement, right? The observation of 3D movement is really what it is. And so it includes 3D form, it includes perspective, it includes all these things, but it also includes the idea that, like, you have to understand that how things move through 3D space. And that is a multi-dimensional axis. So I do think that it can be there. I put it in C tier. It's spared from the F tier. It can't be fully removed because it is incredibly important for 2D animation. It is an absolute ass name. It's a garbage name, and we hate it. We hate it. We want to kill it, but we can't. We can't kill it. It's important. We can't kill it, but it is a C tier. Destroying the 12 principles for animation with a tier list. I mean, it really would not be clickbait. I genuinely believe the 12 principles of animation deserve to die. Now, we have one more. We have our last principle of animation, which is appeal. Give a character personality to make them feel real and interesting. Okay. So, what do you guys think this means? We actually had a lot of people understanding this one. So we had like a lot of ones, a lot of confident, like, yes, appeal, that makes sense, in the chat earlier. So, what does appeal mean? What does appeal mean to you guys? Give a character personality to make them feel real and interesting. Give a character personality to make them feel real and interesting. Appeal. Sad, make it more sad. Happy, make it more happy. What happens when my character is a rock? Very good question. Nice shape design, body language, directing the character's intention and distribution, how lively the person is, or alive, or maybe dead, maybe. Appeal principle is too abstract and unclear sounding for me. It's like make your animations cool and make it feel cool. Yes. Okay. So, let's talk about this. It kind of ties into character acting, so I'm conflicted. Right. True. Also very true. Yes. It ties into character acting. It ties into a lot of things. Now, appeal basically just means don't be boring. That's literally what it means. It means, hey, don't animate something boring, right? Hey, how about like don't animate something boring? Now, what if you want to animate like someone dying? Should I add appeal to that animation? Should I should there be appeal in like a death scene? Should there be appeal in like an environmental scene with just trees? Well, to be fair, you'd probably do that. But like, should there be personality in like, for example, a rock or a stream or something like that? Now, there absolutely can be appeal in everything that you do. 100%, there can be appeal in everything that you do. But what does it mean, right? In this example, we have giving a character personality. Well, that's very specific to characters, actually. That has nothing to do with environments or anything like that. That has nothing to do with props. That has nothing to do with whatever, right? So whether you want to apply it to that or not, that might not be what it originally meant, right? Frankly, because it says specifically character. Okay, cool. Isn't appeal subjective? Appeal is arguably subjective. Yes, absolutely. In my opinion, Studio Trigger are the best in terms of appeal in animation. Yes, they're also the best example of exaggeration, to be fair. But like, what is appeal, right? Like, where does that come from? It comes from their exaggerated poses. It comes from their personality. It comes from their livelihood. It comes from the fact that their motion is really, really contrasted, right? Like they're constantly doing like huge changes in their facial expressions and things like that. So there's a lot of appeal in Studio Trigger, but where does that come from? Well, it comes from exaggeration. It comes from arcs. It comes from anticipation. It comes from their timing and space. It comes from squash and stretch. It comes from their follow through. It comes from their secondary action even. It comes from all of that, right? So what is appeal? It just means like do all the other things like well, I guess, and also do other things well, and also like make it good and like don't make it bad, and then like you've done a good job. I think appeal is a complete and utter horse shit. I think appeal does not deserve a slot anywhere on this list. Appeal can exist as a concept, sure. Appeal is just as useful as like draw the rest of the fucking owl. Like, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. It means just make it good. What does that? It depends on what you think is good, right? Now, don't get me wrong. It's a useful tip for character acting. Absolutely, right? It's a useful tip for like making things generally make it good, I guess. It's like it's sort of like saying like, hey, if you're gonna make art, like make sure like other people like it. It's like, well, what does that mean? Like I can make it so that I like it. That's actually really good. That's useful information. Make it so other people like my art. I don't know what people like. I don't know if people are gonna like that's the problem, right? So what does appeal really mean? It's entirely subjective for 100%, but also it's so vague, right? It's so vague in terms of how you can apply it that it absolutely does not exist as a principle. You know what it is? Hey, what's up? Thanks for the red car, JPEG. What's up, dude? We are oh my god. Well, hey, you came at a good time. We are absolutely destroying the 12 principles of animation. Welcome. Yeah. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. This calls for a change in song. Oh no, I'm gonna get an ad, aren't I? I got an ad! Oh god! Sorry. I'm playing it on YouTube. This is my problem. Here we go. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. We got a change of pace. Welcome, Raiders. Welcome. I'm Dillon Goo. I'm an animator. I'm a professional animator who's been animating for 13 years. I actually worked on Ruby Volume 3. I do a lot of fight animations. I have a YouTube channel called youtube.com/Dillon Goo. There's an ad break right now. Well, that's unfortunate. Some of you guys will understand what I'm saying. Some of you guys won't. That's okay. At the end of the day, I am And the entire raid got pegged with ads. Honestly, we might as well wait for a minute. I got time. Hang on, I'm gonna catch up on chat real quick. There's a couple chats that got missed in the raid. I think it makes the viewer understand the emotion of the characters. I mean, it definitely does. That's true. Appeal does. It can do that. It can do that. It's like realistically 6 principles and 6 extra advice tips to include. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, I think it's more about making things feel, so to speak. It's like if a character is meant to be a slab, make them the slabbiest slab you can, or make heroes zealous or courageous. Yeah, I mean, but you see Detective Smokey? What you just said, like, make a slab the slabbiest slab you can make, or make a hero zealous and courageous. Just exaggeration, baby. Let's go. Oh my god. Welcome everybody. I hope you guys are done with the ad break. I was gonna give you my spiel. I keep getting turbo tax. That's crazy. That's crazy. I'm so sorry. We'll do your taxes, guys. We have 4 days left. Anyway, welcome to the 12 principles of animation, where nothing makes sense, everything's made up, and the points don't matter. We're learning the 12 kind of useful things to know of animation, I guess. Yes, exactly. The 12 principles of animation, they're dead, but we've killed them all. But yeah. So, for those of you guys who don't know, I am an animator. I've been an animator for 13 years professionally. I worked on Ruby Volume 3, if you guys don't know that one. I also have a YouTube channel called youtube.com/Dillon Goo. We're making an original anime called Soul Mart pretty soon. That's gonna be coming out eventually. That's cool. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, you'll see that. But yeah, we're making anime. We do a lot of cool stuff, but I also have really, really strong opinions about animation. So, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm ranting to you guys. Yeah. So, I am currently on the last and 12th principle of the 12 principles of animation. So, you guys have come under a good time to catch my my spiel. Now, appeal, we've just decided, is complete and utter horseshit and does not deserve its position on this list whatsoever. It might as well be shot and buried at the bottom of a ditch. Perfect. I'm learning animation as we speak. Oh, right. Yes, this is useful information. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. For me, it's exaggeration is about how overacted something is compared to appeal, which is something you can either make you feel something based on scenery or character acting. Yes, but the way that you make something, like the way you make someone feel something, just completely changes every single time, right? So the problem is that appeal does not work as a principle. It works as like a general goal to hit, right? But like, you know what I mean? It's like, what does that mean? Like, appeal just means like, make sure that, you know, it like feels good. And so there's so many different ways to do that it doesn't actually work as a principle, right? It doesn't work as something that teaches anyone anything. It just acts as a goal. And that's fine, but it is absolute garbage. So we are done with the 12 principles of animation ranking. It is officially the most accurate and most professional assessment of these principles. So let's go through them again. Anticipation, absolute goated animation principle. One of the most important principles to make things feel satisfying. Anticipation is the concept of setup and payoff. It sets everything up for a nice payoff that you can, you technically choose not to give people if you want to, but anticipation as a concept, really, really well done in animation. Makes all the difference. I talk about this all the time in my streams when I review animation, guys. It is one of my favorite aspects of animation. It feels so good, right? Squash and stretch, pretty good. A tier, not bad. It technically has a lot of power, right? It's a really good piece of advice. You add squash and stretch to almost every single thing that you do. That's just a fact. Like, squash and stretch is a fundamental part of how things kind of move. And it works based on volume preservation because things generally have mass. And so you can't really squish something. So you have to like, you know, without stretching it. Well, no, you can't squish something without it like expanding on the sides, right? So that's what squash means. And stretch, you can't like stretch something without it getting thinner. So like those concepts apply to almost every piece of mass in existence, roughly. But of course, I don't think it's the best principle because it does get a little bit too leaned on as a crutch. And that's my personal opinion. I think squash and stretch is a really useful tool, but a lot of people use it as a shortcut for, say it with me, appeal. A lot of people use it as a shortcut for appeal. You look at this, take a look at this, guys, right? So you look at this, hang on, this is my layered animation example. So you look at this guy and you're like, oh, like how do I make him appealing? Well, you just squash and stretch him and like, look how appealing this guy is. This is so appealing. Yes, it is, because squash and stretch does make things feel like alive and it feels good, right? But like, Why is appeal there? Anyway, you get my point. Squash and stretch, really important. Interestingly enough, it gets relied on a little bit too much in Western animation. Also, it's importantly not a principle of animation in the East, surprisingly, not at all. So like, that's something we can kind of go over later on and maybe a different stream because I'm actually over time right now. But yeah, squash and stretch, not always as important as we might think, even though it is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly helpful and useful. So, fair. Now, next we have follow through and overlapping action. This is pretty much the most important, worst named principle. It is the longest name for what should be the simplest thing to explain. And it's just drag and drag and overshoot, right? So it's essentially drag and overshoot for most things. And it kind of works on this principle of like, oh, like it is secondary to the primary motion that is like following the thing, right? That's why secondary animation is used so frequently to describe follow through and overlapping action, which is why we have put secondary action in absolute garbage tier, because it is something that is often confused for follow through and overlapping action, even though it's completely separate. And we'll get to that. Now, timing and motion. Timing and motion. Why is it called timing and motion? When motion is just motion. You can't say motion is a principle of animation because animation is motion. It's like saying moving is important for moving. Like, bro, that's the least helpful thing you've ever told me. Now, timing. Is timing useful? Now, timing is a useful thing to keep in mind, but is it actually a useful term? Because what does timing mean in animation? Well, technically speaking, in 2D animation, it means how many drawings you're drawing. But that has nothing to do with timing, does it? It doesn't really make any sense. Now, spacing, which is a term that's often used to describe timing, is a much better word for this. So we rename it to spacing, it could be a little bit better. So we put it in C, but it's actually pretty important. Spacing is an important principle. It regards how fast something is perceived to be moving. Very, very important. Cool stuff. Spacing is great. Timing and motion, piece of crap. Now, arcs. Arcs are pretty good. I'd say arcs are really, really important, but what are arcs? Right? Very, very hard to pinpoint exactly what arcs refers to because it kind of encompasses everything. Everything that moves in an arc is an arc, but also that only works after you look at something moving. It doesn't really work at producing movement, right? It's like the categories of different arcs are all separate and different in terms of how you build them. So for example, pivot points versus gravity have different arcs. One's a circle, one's a parabola. These are different causes of the arcs, and yet they're being used as all under the same umbrella, which doesn't really help someone who's building animation because they're gonna think of arcs as just one thing. And it's not one thing, it's multiple things. Also, arcs, not important for everything. Yes, like when you shoot an arrow, you're not doing arcs with an arrow. Not all the time. You could if you want to. But you can really just shoot an arrow straight and it's fine. And straight lines are actually important for animation. They're really, really useful. So like having arcs as a principle, saying that like arcs are somehow the most important thing and more important than lines, or lines don't exist, completely false. Completely false. Are they important? Yes, but misleading. Very misleading. So arcs, I think, can lead people astray. I don't think it's a good animation principle, so to speak. Solid drawing, very important for 2D animation. Allows people to understand 3D perspective. Perspective and form, really, really important for understanding how things move in 3D as well. Really important for 2D animators. 3D animators, not as important, but still important for being able to observe 3D movement as a part of their understanding so they can recreate it, right? So that's technically allowed to be here, but just really, really bad name because no one ever talks about it because no one knows what solid drawing even means. Because everybody thinks it's about shading or some shit. Like that's, who cares about shading? It has nothing to do with shading at all. Everything's cell shaded. Nothing to do with shading. Solid drawing just means, can you understand the 3D form of the thing that you're drawing as you're drawing it and as you're animating it? That's all it means. Yeah, I fell for the arc trap. Yes, exactly. A lot of people do. Arcs, people think that arcs must be in every single thing. They don't have to be in every single thing. They just exist as a thing that exists and it's useful to observe, but it's not useful to produce in everything. It's just how it goes. Now, slow in and slow out. That's just timing. Fuck that shit. Slow in and slow out does not deserve to be on here. It is literally just an example of timing and spacing. It is a fucking example. Oh my God, is it just an example? How can it be that another principle of animation is simply an example of another principle of animation? How insane is that? Right? It's like if you had staging as a principle of animation, and then you had the rule of thirds as another principle of animation. Do you guys not realize how asinine that is? Anyway, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Staging, also piece of shit. Staging is fine. It's a really useful tool, actually. It's really good for like composition. If you have a good framing for your character, a good character staging for your character, these are going to help the storytelling. These are also things that the animator has nothing to do with. Generally speaking, these are storyboarders that do it. These are artists that do it. These are directors, cinematographers. They're the ones who determine the staging for these pieces. And if you are also directing and doing that's fine. That's great. You can learn staging. Totally different skill from animation. Animation has nothing to do with staging. Everything to do with staging, if you look at rule of thirds, if you look at composition, you look at like, you know, like the clarity of a character's silhouette, how, all these things, absolutely none of them have anything to do with movement. None of them. So staging doesn't belong here. Is it useful? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Straight ahead and pose to pose action. Have nothing to do with animation as a principle. There are workflows. These are workflows, guys. So on top of the fact that straight ahead and pose to pose are workflows and not principles of animation, they're just how you do things. But not only that, but there's other workflows of animation that have equal importance that are not included on here, like layered animation. It's an equally valid way of working in animation that is not included in the straight ahead and pose to pose principle. It's as if they just be like, yeah, these are the two that and they exist, and like there's no, this principle of animation would be more aptly named as there's techniques you can use in animation, the principle of animation, which doesn't make any sense, right? So techniques should not be part of the principles. Principles are technically ideas, right? Principles are these things that you have to understand in order to create animation. It doesn't have to be a technique to create animation. That's just the whole thing that you just gotta learn. That's fine. But like the actual idea, that's the principle. Now, exaggeration. Exaggeration is just, I mean, it's just exaggeration. Do you want to exaggerate or do you not want to exaggerate? It's up to you. It doesn't really matter. Like, you can have exaggerated animation, you can have non-exaggerated animation. You don't need to have exaggerated animation all the time. So is it like a fundamental principle of animation? No, it's a simple suggestion for people who may want to exaggerate, but maybe not. It's very popular in the West, not as popular in the East. It just kind of depends. You look at panty and stocking, and you look at like, you know, like Chainsaw Man. There's a lot more exaggeration in panty and stocking than Chainsaw Man because panty and stocking takes a lot of inspiration from Western cartoons, right? That's why that's happening, right? So a lot of the principles, Western principles of animation are being applied to panty and stocking. That's fine, but it doesn't have to be there, right? So is it a principle? I don't think so. I don't think it needs to be. I don't think it needs to be. It doesn't need to be in every single animation, right? And then we finally have, I'm running out of breath. And then we finally have secondary action, which is a total piece of shit because it is the worst named thing that everybody confuses as follow through and overlap. Because secondary animation is a thing, which is totally separate from secondary action. But secondary action is actually the second thing that you're doing outside of the first thing that you're doing, which is like if you're walking and you're waving. If you're talking and you're drinking, these are examples of secondary action. Where you drink, you take a sip from your drink while you're saying something. That's a secondary action to the primary action of talking. That's what the real tip is, and nobody even knows this. Literally nobody knows that secondary action refers to that. In fact, even the graphic got it wrong, thinking that it was like a reaction to the initial ball dropping, right? Which is definitely not true. And so, then we have appeal. We've just talked about appeal. I don't need to go over too much. Appeal does not belong here because it is simply a goal to strive for and not a fundamental building block how to achieve good animation. In fact, I would say it's just the exact opposite of that. Yeah. Because ultimately, appeal is just a combination of all the other things that you did well. That's really what it is. That's all it is. Did you act well? Do you have good timing? You have good arcs? Do you have good solid drawing? Do you have good staging? Do you have a good exaggeration? Do you have good swash and stretch? Do you have good anticipation? Do you have good follow through and overlapping action? Do you have all those things? Yes, then you have good appeal. Good job. Okay, we're done. So, my question to you guys is how well do you agree with my opinions? My God, my throat is in pain, and I don't even like talking about animation principles, so this is the worst. You guys want to do ZZZ like animations? Yes, ZZZ has a lot of squash and stretch, and they want to do it, and that's fine, right? Like that's fine. It's a stylistic choice, absolutely. So yeah. It's funny because in a way, no animation is also its own. Wait a minute. I'm glad you guys like it. To give some benefit of the doubt, it feels a bit like they meant appeal as intention, but even then, it's still a broader artistic concept. That's fair. I mean, I agree with the fact that appeal is ultimately built into like the concept of building an animation to push into appeal, right? So like appeal is useful as an acting tip. I completely agree with that. But yeah, in a broader sense, it can apply to so many other things that it just becomes so big. So like I agree, it does refer to intention. I absolutely agree with that. Yeah, but that's more of like a principle of art. You know what I mean? Not really a principle of animation, so to speak. I agree, partially because it was really funny watching. Go to the top article and immediately invalidating it. Yeah, that's true. Because people don't understand what it really means, man. They don't get it. They don't get it like I do. Anyway, will this stream be available to watch in full on your YouTube channel? Not in full. Well, actually, we'll put it on the VOD channel, yeah. But we'll have, if you guys don't know, if you go to Professor Goo VODs, there is a VOD channel that has all our past streams. But not the Patreon ones, but we do have the edited video that's gonna be going on Professor Goo. So it'll be on the secondary channel. But yeah, Professor Goo will have this one, and then we'll have the VOD channel have this full stream. Even though my forte as a generalist is more on modeling and texturing side, I totally agree with you. It's 100%. Let's go! Let's go. I think it's really tough to do ZZZ-like animation as a solo animator, at least a lengthy one. I mean, you probably could do it. You certainly could do it, but you do need to know a lot of like tips and tricks on how to break rigs. Breaking rigs is the hardest thing that ZZZ does because you have to like be really familiar with them. Yeah, it's tough. You know, it's a good list because the principles exclusive to animation make it to the top. Yeah, let's go. It's true. Within a reasonable amount of time. Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's definitely true. Well defended assault on the institution. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's Sloth that makes those edits? Yes. Yes, exactly. Sending a complaint to the CEO of animation as we speak. Yes, thank you. Well, we can complain to Mr. Walt. He's the one. It was him the whole time. Honestly, I needed this to reassure my understanding of 12 principles of animation. I mean, yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like, in my opinion, like so much of this is like, I feel like I've been gaslit that like by not understanding the 12 principles, I was somehow not a real animator, right? Like, I obviously don't believe that now, but like maybe there was a certain point in my life where I believed a little bit of that, right? Because I hadn't really learned, I'm fully self-taught, so like I didn't learn the 12 principles when I first started. So like, I fully looked at these after understanding animation as a concept on my own. And that's, oh, hang on. So that's where like my opinions kind of come from, because I was able to view it from a different side, not from a student side, but from like a teacher side, right? So like, yeah, there was a point in time where I think a lot of students probably felt this way too, because they were learning these 12 principles and they don't all make sense, but they're like, well, of course they don't make sense. I'm learning them. They should make sense eventually. But let me tell you, they don't ever make sense. You can eventually, you know, you keep going years and years into your career and they never make sense. They never make sense. They're never going to, because look at this. Yeah. Anyway, I've said enough. Dude, it's kind of crazy that breaking a rig as a concept is so rarely taught in 3D animation classes. Yeah, very true, honestly. Hi, Dylan, have you thought about including dubbing in your videos? I've seen some online that are really nice. Oh, honestly, yes, I would really like to. It's something that I want to look into, but I also want to do it right. There's certain things about like figuring out who to cast and stuff like that. Like it's really complicated, but like I do want to figure out how to do multilingual dubbing eventually, especially for Soul Mart. That'd be cool. We're definitely gonna have Japanese dubbing for Soul Mart, 100%. I mean, it's a Japanese production technically, right? So like it's gonna be like official anime style dubbing. We're gonna get some like real industry actors for that, but it's gonna be primarily dubbed in English because that's my native language, and then we're gonna dub over it in Japanese, which would be cool. But yeah. Anyway, more on Soul Mart later. Also, if you need a face to the name, we met at BlenderCon. I was the girl with the Unreal Engine project. Well, shit, I'm going to Blender Conference next week. I know this is not the same Blender Conference, but yes, in Amsterdam. Hell yeah, I'm glad you're here. Awesome. I hope your project's going well. When I was a student, I always thought half of this stuff was fluff, so it's nice to see you talk about it. I'm glad. Oh my goodness. Because it's true, and nobody tells you that. None of the teachers have the balls to say that the 12 animation principles are wrong. They don't have the balls. They need the balls. Thank you for moving to Japan and sacrificing yourself so we can watch your streams at normal times. Actual factual. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you guys, I'm glad you're enjoying the benefits. Yeah. Anyway, I have to go, guys. I'm actually late for a thing. So I will talk to you guys later. I do want to make, eventually, we're going to make a video about exactly what the 12 principles of animation should look like. I'm going to completely redo them, make them from the ground up, give you my idea of what those principles should be. They're going to be totally different. They're going to look totally different, but I'll give you that list eventually. So when we talk about it, tune in for that stream. I'll make a whole list or whatever. We'll figure it out. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed my complete and total destruction of the patriarchy. 9 old men. More like 9 little bitches. I'm kidding. Everything's fine. They deserve happiness. All right, bye guys.